In 1962, Burundi gained independence from Belgium, marking the end of decades of colonial rule. The air was electric with anticipation, as the people of Burundi looked forward to a new era of self-determination and national pride. The streets of Bujumbura overflowed with hope and optimism. For the first time, Burundians felt the future was truly in their own hands, and dreams of unity and prosperity seemed within reach. The new nation began as a constitutional monarchy, led by King Mwambutsa IV and his charismatic prime minister, Prince Louis Rwagasore. Rwagasore was a visionary, one of the few leaders respected by both Hutu and Tutsi, and he inspired hope for a peaceful, united Burundi. But this dream was shattered almost immediately. Just weeks after taking office, Rwagasore was assassinated in a shocking act of political violence. The nation was plunged into mourning, and the sense of possibility evaporated overnight. His death destroyed the fragile unity that had barely begun to form. Old ethnic tensions, long suppressed under colonial rule, quickly resurfaced, and suspicion grew between Hutu and Tutsi communities. King Mwambutsa tried desperately to balance power between Hutu and Tutsi, but his efforts were more about maintaining his own survival than truly sharing authority. The monarchy struggled to keep the peace as the political climate grew more volatile. Political power became a dangerous game of musical chairs. Leaders and officials lived in constant fear of being overthrown, and trust between political factions evaporated. Violence, not debate, became the way to resolve disputes. Political assassinations, riots, and street clashes replaced the hopeful discussions of independence. The army, once a neutral force on the sidelines, began to see itself as a key player in the nation's future. Soldiers watched the chaos unfold, their presence growing more visible and intimidating. The assassination of Rwagasore set a dangerous precedent, showing that violence could change the course of the nation. It sent a chilling message to all who sought power. Instability became the new normal. The military watched, waiting for the moment when they would be called upon, or seize the opportunity, to intervene directly in politics. The brief honeymoon of independence was over before it truly began. The promise of a united, peaceful Burundi faded into uncertainty and fear. Soon, the soldiers would stop watching and take control, forever altering the course of Burundi's history. By 1965, Burundi's politics were chaos. A failed Hutu coup sent King Mwambutsa fleeing, leaving his teenage son Ntare V in charge. But real power was slipping away from the monarchy. Enter Captain Michel Micombero, a Tutsi army officer and prime minister. In 1966, while Ntare V was abroad, Micombero staged a coup, abolished the monarchy, and declared himself president. The republic was born at gunpoint, not by consensus. Micombero centralized power in a one-party state, favoring a small Tutsi elite. The army became the state, and the Hutu majority was sidelined. The coup set a pattern in Burundi. The military, not elections, decided who ruled. The military's grip on politics was now absolute. For decades, power would change hands not through ballots but through barracks. The cycle of military strongmen had begun. Micombero ruled with an iron fist, but by 1976, even his allies wanted change. His cousin, Colonel Jean-Baptiste Bagaza, ousted him in a bloodless coup, promising reform. Bagaza modernized infrastructure and tried to ease ethnic tensions, but the military and Tutsi elite stayed in control. Political freedom was limited, and Bagaza cracked down on rivals, including the Catholic Church. In 1987, while Bagaza was abroad, Major Pierre Buyoya, another military insider, took power in another coup. Buyoya promised openness, but the cycle of military takeovers continued. Each leader claimed to be a reformer, but real change was elusive. Power was a prize seized by force, not earned by trust. Coup became Burundi's political tradition. The military's dominance was unbroken, and the people's hopes for democracy faded. The game of musical chairs continued. Only the uniforms changed. In the early 1990s, under mounting international and domestic pressure, President Pierre Buyoya reluctantly agreed to a series of democratic reforms. For the first time in Burundi's history, the possibility of free and fair elections seemed within reach, raising hopes among ordinary citizens for a new era of peace and inclusion. In 1993, Melchior Ndadaye, a Hutu and a symbol of change, won Burundi's first genuinely free election, an historic and emotional moment for the nation. For many, it was a long-awaited break from decades of Tutsi-dominated rule. Ndadaye immediately sought to heal old wounds, appointing Tutsis to key government posts and reaching out to former rivals. He preached reconciliation, urging Burundians to look beyond ethnic divisions and work together for a better future. But just 3 months into his presidency, hope was shattered. Ndadaye was brutally assassinated by hardline Tutsi soldiers who feared losing their grip on power. The killing sent shockwaves through the country, destroying fragile trust and triggering a wave of violence and panic in the streets. Hutu extremists retaliated with deadly force while the army struck back even harder. The nation quickly descended into chaos, with violence erupting in both cities and the countryside. The brief experiment with democracy ended in bloodshed, as government institutions collapsed and fear took hold. The assassination confirmed the deepest fears of many. The army would never willingly accept Hutu rule, no matter the cost. Burundi spiraled into a devastating civil war, marked by massacres, reprisals, and the displacement of hundreds of thousands. Both Hutu and Tutsi communities suffered unimaginable losses. The dream of a united, peaceful nation was lost amid the violence, replaced by grief and despair. The country became trapped in a relentless cycle of fear, revenge, and suspicion. As families hid and communities fractured, the promise of democracy was buried alongside its first elected president, leaving a nation to mourn what might have been. Ndadaye's assassination unleashed a brutal civil war that lasted over a decade. Hutu rebel groups like CNDD-FDD and Palipa Hutu FNL fought the Tutsi-dominated army. The conflict tore communities apart, neighbors became enemies, and civilians suffered most. The economy collapsed and hundreds of thousands fled their homes. Political power shifted, but the army remained the real authority. In 1996, Buyoya returned in another coup, claiming to restore order. Ironically, his return opened the door to peace talks, pressured by regional leaders. The war proved that no side could win by force. Negotiations began in Arusha, Tanzania, offering a glimmer of hope. The long, painful journey toward peace had started. In 2000, after years of war and negotiation, the Arusha peace agreement was signed. Mediated by leaders like Nelson Mandela, it offered a blueprint for a new Burundi. The deal created a transitional government and mandated ethnic power sharing at every level. The army was to be integrated, split evenly between Hutus and Tutsis. The system was built on checks and balances, not trust. Implementation was slow and messy. Not all rebels joined at first. Eventually, the largest group, CNDD-FDD, joined the process. Elections in 2005 brought former rebel Pierre Nkurunziza to the presidency. The civil war officially ended and Burundi entered a fragile new era. The peace was imperfect, but it was real. For the first time in decades, the country had a chance to move forward. Under President Nkurunziza, Burundi experienced a complex mix of progress and setbacks. His leadership brought hope for stability after years of conflict, but also revealed the deep challenges facing the nation. The integrated army, a symbol of unity after civil war, largely held together, and for a time, peace mostly endured across the country. Yet beneath the surface, old habits and divisions lingered, threatening the fragile calm. The government responded to dissent with a heavy hand, cracking down on opposition voices and struggling to root out corruption that undermined public trust. In 2015, Nkurunziza's controversial bid for a third term in office ignited mass protests and unrest, culminating in a failed coup attempt that shook the nation. The resulting crisis triggered a harsh government crackdown, widespread fear, and forced thousands of Burundians to flee their homes, seeking safety in neighboring countries. As violence and repression grew, Burundi became increasingly isolated from its neighbors and the international community, putting its hard-won gains at risk. The sudden death of Nkurunziza in 2020 brought Evariste Ndayishimiye to power. He promised reform and a new era for Burundi, raising hopes for change. Since then, some steps toward reconciliation and dialogue have followed, with efforts to bring communities together and address past grievances. Still, many challenges remain. Poverty remains widespread and trust in government institutions is fragile, making daily life difficult for many Burundians. The wounds of the past are still healing, as survivors and communities continue to seek justice and understanding. Burundi's story is a powerful lesson. Peace is a process, not a single event. It requires patience, commitment, and the willingness to confront painful memories. The struggle to escape the cycles of violence and build a lasting peace continues, especially for the country's youth who dream of a better future. Ultimately, Burundi's future depends on building trust and unity among its people, not just changing leaders. The journey is far from over, but hope endures.